All right, welcome back to the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm Aaron Brightman, coming to you Thursday morning. Wanted to get something out on Wednesday, did not happen. Had 3-episode special on Monday covering Rutgers football recruiting, Rutgers 10 years in the Big Ten, and then also men's basketball. So if you didn't check all those out, please do. And this episode is brought to you, as always, by Knights of the Raritan, the Rutgers NIL Collective. Click on the link in the description of this episode to join their free newsletter to learn more about them, to learn more about activities they have coming up for the seasons, with the school year about to kick off, and most importantly, how to support Rutgers student athletes with NIL. So this episode, wanted to cover a few things, but really wanted to focus on something. If you're on Twitter, if you're on X, there was a bunch of videos that came out just kind of randomly on Tuesday. Hoop Fiends is a great account that I follow, and they put out an awesome highlight reel of Corey Sanders. So I wanted to bring some appreciation to Corey Sanders. I know that Rutgers fans do appreciate him. It really is true that he was so important to helping to lay the foundation of what Rutgers men's basketball is now. And his first 2 years, Steve Pikiell's first 2 years with Corey Sanders, the development that you saw in Corey Sanders from year one under Pikiell to year two, not only just statistically, but on the court and what he became at the end of his junior season, really was a clear sign that Steve Pikiell was the right guy for Rutgers. Corey Sanders obviously coming to Rutgers under Eddie Jordan. That first year for Corey, he was the star. Eddie's last season, of course, things didn't go well. And getting Corey Sanders to stay was a big development when Steve Pikiell was hired. And Shoes Vetrona had Vinny Vetrona's son on a few months ago, was a really pivotal assistant for Rutgers in those early years, and really just helping to keep Corey Sanders at Rutgers and just helping with his development as well. So let's not forget Shoes Vetrona here in terms of his impact with Corey Sanders. Corey Sanders obviously had a ton of natural ability. I mean, the thing about it's funny because now with, Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey and, all these top recruits, they have their own brands in a way when they come to college now. And Corey Sanders was ahead of his time when it came to that. I mean, he was kind of a star on YouTube and just in kind of like grassroots basketball. Everyone knew who Corey Sanders was. He was a highlight reel in high school. Perspective-wise, Steve Pikiell's been doing this a long time in terms of managing big names. And Corey Sanders was his first big name at Rutgers. And I thought that he handled him really well and got the most out of him. And, one side I wanted to share about Corey Sanders that I saw covering games, being in press conferences, is he really cared. He was not, like I said, he came to Rutgers a YouTube star, and he easily could have left. And he stayed. He committed to the rebuild. It was bumpy at times, but he really matured under Steve Pikiell. And that junior year, we saw the fruits of his labor in terms of his crowning achievement, and really kind of the first big sign that we saw Rutgers taking a real step forward in the Big Ten was his 2018 performance at Madison Square Garden. I was there for all 3 games. He averaged almost 25 points a game, 24.7 points, and just put on a masterclass. I mean, it was as dominant a 3-game performance as we've seen from a Rutgers basketball player in a very long time. Going back to that Indiana game, and I did a podcast last year. It was talking about Rutgers' dominance against Indiana. They've now won 9 of their last 11, and it all started in that Big Ten second-round game. Rutgers was down 24-8, and I remember the timeout, and I remember sitting there under the basket and the feeling in the Garden and Indiana fans and how it was a cocktail party. It was they were having a good time. I remember thinking, wow, this is kind of deja vu to the year before, where they got blown out by Northwestern in the second round. And then all of a sudden, Corey Sanders comes out of that huddle and just dominates Indiana for a 28 points, and just some of the highlight reels. I mean, Big Ten men's basketball Twitter account put out a highlight reel of his Indiana highlights on Tuesday as well, following Hoop Fiends putting out almost 8-minute highlight reel. And then men's basketball, the Rutgers men's basketball account tweeted it out as well. praising Corey, his ability to penetrate, his ability to make plays, his confidence, his athletic ability. He was only 6'2", but I mean, some of the dunks that he could do were just amazing. He was a pretty good rebounder for his size. I mean, he averaged over 4 rebounds a game his junior year. But one thing that people forget about Corey is that he had a very high assist rate all 3 seasons at Rutgers. But the notable thing his junior year was that his turnover rate dropped significantly. So his decision-making got better. He became a better defender. He had a high steal rate every year. But he became a better defender. He became a better team player. He became a better leader. And he put Rutgers on his back those 3 games. And listen, Mike Williams, Deshaun Freeman, those guys meant a lot in those early years as well, no doubt. But Corey Sanders gave Rutgers a legitimate star that on any given night you felt if Corey goes off, Rutgers has a chance. And that was hope. And that's what we needed in those early years. And Corey Sanders provided that. And that performance at MSG, I mean, made first team all Big Ten. They didn't get past the quarterfinals. But even in that loss against Purdue, his performance was incredible. And I was sitting next to Jerry Carino at that game, and he turned to me, and I remember at the end, he said, as a Rutgers guy, you must be so proud right now. And that was the overwhelming feeling in the building, to hear the chants, to see the fans, to feel the vibe. It was a bit magical. And I know some people might say you're getting carried away. They lost to Purdue in the Big Ten quarterfinals, but for a program that was starved for success, that felt like magic. It felt like, wow, things are changing. And Corey Sanders was at the root of that in terms of those performances, those 3 nights in New York City. And for that, he should never be forgotten for what he gave to Rutgers those 3 years, for staying. Obviously, it's a different era now. But, that sophomore to junior year, he tested the NBA waters. He could have gone pro overseas. He could have transferred, but he stayed. He stayed, and he became a key piece to the early years of the Steve Pikiell era that now obviously enters crazy expectations for the 24-25 season. Maybe he doesn't get, and I know Gio's talked about this, is that Corey Sanders was a big influence on Gio. Gio was a freshman during Corey's junior year, and he really, to see Gio blossom his freshman year, that Seton Hall game was, and I was at that game too at the Rack. That was, Corey Sanders took over that game. And obviously the year before when they beat Ohio State in the Big Ten first round, first ever Big Ten tournament win for Rutgers, that was certainly a step. But beating Seton Hall at the Rack was a huge sign. Seton Hall was ranked 15th at the time. But Corey Sanders and Gio Baker were a 1-2 dynamic duo in that game. And then they were in the Big Ten tournament as well. And Gio had his coming out party against Purdue in that loss. He had 25 points, I believe. But just, Gio learning from Corey in that first season made a big impact on his career at Rutgers. I know Rutgers fans appreciate Corey Sanders, but I just thought with his video going kind of viral within the Rutgers world on social media on Tuesday, it was a great opportunity to just kind of rehash some thoughts on him. And one thought in particular, I was at the Wisconsin game at the Garden when they lost that game. They were up, 8 points with like 2.5 minutes to go. That was a great Wisconsin team. They ended up losing in overtime. It was a heartbreaking loss. And I remember sitting in press row and looking at Corey on the podium next to Pikiell, and he was gutted. And you could see how much it meant to him. And also at the Garden when they were winning, it meant so much to him. And that's what I think gets maybe missed, is that he truly was a Rutgers guy. And, of course, there's a what if he had stayed for his senior year. And he ultimately did not make the NBA. He's still playing overseas. And obviously hope that he has a long career overseas. But what Rutgers meant to him, it's not just what he meant to Rutgers and Steve Pikiell's early years, but I think Rutgers meant something to him. And for a kid from Florida, is again a big time YouTube star. He was a viral star. He was known for his dunking. He became a complete basketball player under Steve Pikiell his junior year. And it was great to see. And it was an early developmental sign that this coaching staff, Brandon Knight was there, obviously, Carl Hobbs at the time, Jay Young was there, that they were onto something. I did rapid reaction videos on the court of MSG with Brian Fonseca. You can look him up. And I remember just saying after that Purdue loss, like, if you're not all in on the Steve Pikiell era, I don't know what to tell you. And a big part of that was what he got out of not just the success they had in that tournament, how he helped Corey Sanders develop into the player that he was, because he was not a complete player when he got to Rutgers. And he left as complete a player as he, I think, could be. And that is a testament to Corey Sanders and the coaching staff. But in terms of that corollary to Gio and Corey Sanders, I do look at this year's team with Jeremiah Williams and Dylan Harper as not the same thing, but that type of mentor, guy that's been through a lot, that's talented in his own right, but can also help a young talented player. And obviously different levels here we're talking, but I kind of thought of that comparison as well, and I think that's an important dynamic for this year, with Jeremiah Williams and Dylan Harper being in sync in the Rutgers backcourt. And it reminds me of the early days with Corey Sanders and Gio Baker. A couple other notes. Oscar Palmquist signed a contract overseas in Sweden, so good for him. Congratulations to him. Also wanted to mention that Aiden Derkack, 2026 shooting guard, brother of Jordan Derkack, who I had on the podcast last week. If you didn't see that interview, check it out. He was outstanding. Really excited to see him this year. But Aiden Derkack is rated number 61st recruit in the 26 class per 24/7 composite rankings, number 15 shooting guard in the country, top 5 New Jersey recruit from Colonia. Rutgers offered him this week. He also picked up a recent offer from Villanova. He plays for Team Final in the EYBL circuit, really powerhouse there. He's on the U16 right now, so he'll be on their senior team next year. But obviously a top target in the 26 class. Notable offer going out this week. He tweeted it out. And Gio Baker comes up again. He actually trains Aiden and Aiden's sister, which Jordan talked about on my interview with him last week. So check that out. But strong ties there. Villanova certainly in the mix will be an issue in terms of competition. But Rutgers in the mix right now for Aiden Derkack, who is just going to enter his junior year coming up. If you're into the EA Sports college football game, it's being released this weekend. And notable, Kyle Monungai was rated as one of the top 100 players in the game. I know some people are more into it than others, but that was on social media, so that's notable. And believe it or not, less than 2 weeks now away from Big Ten Media Days for Rutgers football. Greg Schiano and players will be appearing at Big Ten Media Days at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis on July 23rd, a Tuesday. Soon after will be the start of training camp. So a lot of coverage coming up. I'm working on some guests, working on some content. Things are going to pick up here really quickly. Also, United States women's national soccer team has been training at Yercac. Casey Murphy, Rutgers women's soccer legend, in goal. Part of that Olympic team headed to Paris later this month. So that was cool to see on social media as well. It's July, but there's plenty to talk about with Rutgers. So this is the 4th podcast of the week. I'll get this out Thursday morning, and I'll be back on Friday with something else. Thanks so much for listening and watching once again here at The Scarlet Faithful.